President Kennedy died. Walter's voice cracked, and every sound in the room just stopped. The fluorescent lights hummed. The chalk dust hung in a little cloud, and the wall clock ticked like it had something to say. Somebody had dragged a radio in from the principal's office. It sat on a desk like a witness. A few hours earlier, it was just a Friday. Clear skies, errands, a math quiz I hadn't studied for. America felt young, tail fins in parking lots, dreams in color, the moon waiting its turn. I'll take you through those hours, the long weekend, and how we learned to keep going. You ever notice how a day can split in half without warning? 1 minute you're mid-sentence, the next your whole mouth forgets how to move. That's how it felt when the first bulletin cut through. Shots fired in Dallas. No context, just that phrase, like a loose wire sparking on the floor. The teacher bit her lip so hard it left a white mark. She kept writing on the board even though the room was already somewhere else. The custodian rolled the radio in and fiddled with the dial, and the static fought us like it didn't want to give up the truth. Across town, a cashier forgot the change and stared past a line of people who suddenly didn't care about the price of bread. A bus driver turned the volume up and let the schedule slide. That's what I remember first, permission to stop pretending the day was normal. The first flash said the president had been shot. Not killed, shot. We seized on that word like it was a life preserver. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe a backfire. Maybe he's fine. Hope is stubborn like that. It digs in its heels even as the floor drops away. The radio crackled into names. Dallas, motorcade, Parkland Hospital, and those words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's city, someone else's life. Meanwhile, kitchens across the country were waking up their televisions, that glow blooming slow from the center. You know the sound a set made then? That low electric hiss and the little pop as the picture settled into focus. In newsrooms, phones rang like alarm bells. Wire machines chewed out inches of paper like a nervous habit. On street corners, payphones gathered quarters and people leaned into the metal hoods, heads bowed as if the booth itself could keep the world out. Then came Cronkite. White shirt, tie loosened a notch, that steady voice trying to carry a nation across a thin bridge. The updates were clipped. Careful, the way a doctor talks when he knows the family's listening. When he took off his glasses and looked at us bare-eyed, that's when it got real. You could feel the air thin. President Kennedy died. He didn't finish the sentence with anything fancy. He didn't need to. We heard the clock and our own breathing. In the classroom, a girl started praying under her breath. She wasn't churchy. None of us were that day. It was instinct, like reaching out when a cup falls. The teacher folded her hands on the desk and stared at them like her fingers might deliver a better answer if she held still. Somebody asked if we should go home. The principal's announcement said we would. But to wait, nobody moved. Waiting became a kind of respect. Across the country, factory floors stilled. Machines that had chattered all morning fell quiet and left a ringing in people's ears. In barbershops, clippers clicked off and men sat with capes still around their necks, hair clinging to their skin, staring at the TV like it might blink first. In living rooms, women stood with their hands on dish towels, not drying a thing, just holding on to a thread of routine. What nobody knew at the time was how fast Dallas had turned from parade route to crime scene. That would come later. With names and a window and a stack of boxes, right then all we had were fragments. Parkland, trauma room, the governor. Words drifted in and landed like strangers on the couch. The radio man said the last rites had been given. That's when the stubborn hope stumbled. If you grew up Catholic, that phrase had weight. Even if you didn't, it did. A kid in our class raised his hand like he was in a normal lesson and asked why anyone would do this. The teacher opened her mouth and closed it again. There wasn't a chapter for that. She finally said, "We don't know." And that was the truest thing in the room. Phones started ringing in the hallway, parents calling, offices calling, rumors traveled faster than buses. Somebody said there'd been more shots. Someone else said they had a suspect. The principal told us to gather our things quietly. That word quietly was unnecessary. We were moving through syrup. On the walk home, the whole neighborhood had the same expression, trying to listen and understand at the same time. Radios were up in parked cars. A man in a service station leaned on the pump handle and didn't pump. The clerk next door put a handwritten sign on the door, closed, then stood inside and kept listening anyway. Sirens drifted somewhere. Not urgent, just present, like weather. By the time I got to our front step, the TV had joined the household like a relative who planned on staying. The picture flickered between anchors and faraway faces. A map of Dallas appeared with a dot nobody could look away from. Reporters repeated themselves because repeating was safer than speculating. That's what responsible sounded like then. While the country held its breath, Dallas was already sealing off corners, counting cartridges. and following a thin trail through a building with book boxes for walls. One suspect, they said, had slipped into the crowd, and the day, already sliced open, kept bleeding into night. The thing is, even as our houses went quiet, Dallas got loud with sirens and orders. If the president wasn't safe in broad daylight, who was? That question sat heavy in every living room. We watched the screen for answers and got glimpses instead. A building, a window, a line of officers moving with purpose, and a little panic around the edges. They kept showing the Texas schoolbook depository. Ordinary brick, ordinary windows, but one window had already turned into a story. Boxes stacked like a fort, a perch where someone had time to think. Reporters started tossing words at us: rifle, cartridge, 6th floor. Then they'd pull back, careful, because rumors ran faster than facts. You could feel the anchors balancing on a thin rail, say enough to keep us informed, not so much that they fed the wrong fire. Meanwhile, our coffee went cold. You know that taste when the oil separates and it isn't coffee anymore? That. Neighbors stood on porches with their coats open, hands tucked in under their elbows. Every house on the block had the same glow in the front window, the soft gray light of a set that wasn't going off anytime soon. Kids came home early. School buses pulling up with drivers who'd already heard and still drove slow, like speed might make it worse. Back in Dallas, the names of places started to fix themselves in our minds. Dealey Plaza, Parkland, the Depository, the new vocabulary of loss, motorcade, trauma room. We learned those words in real time, like we were all enrolled in the same terrible class. An officer held up a long paper bag, a shape inside it we didn't have to see to understand. Reporters shouted questions that were too big for any one answer. It felt fast and messy because it was fast and messy. Real life doesn't pause for narration. Where I was, church bells began to toll, not a lot of them, just enough that you could count the spaces between rings. Somewhere downtown, a siren rose and fell without meaning to say more than "we're here." The factory whistle at the edge of town didn't blow at shift's end. A small mercy. Who wanted that sound cutting through? At the gas station, men who never met swapped updates like baseball cards. "They've got someone?" "No, that's just talk." "They found a rifle." Every sentence ended in a question mark. And then came the news from a movie house in Oak Cliff, a theater. That detail landed oddly. Bright marquee, velvet seats. Saturday matinee energy on a Friday gone wrong. We heard there'd been a scuffle in the aisle. Officers with their hats knocked sideways. Hands on a man who fought like he wanted to be anywhere else. I remember thinking of all the places for a suspect to be. The theater felt like a hideout built for denial. Sit in the dark, let the news wash over the screen, pretend you're nobody. It didn't work. The cameras didn't have it live, not that moment, but they had the aftermath. A name, Lee Harvey Oswald, said slowly, as if trying it on. A face, pale under harsh lights, eyes darting like he still had a plan. Reporters crowding hallways, microphones stalked with foam, the whole scene sweating. We watched officers shepherd him through doorways and felt our hearts pick up like the floor itself was moving. In homes like mine, the conversation got quiet and sharp. If they had a suspect, was he the only one? If he wasn't, then what? That was the fear under the facts, the idea of a wider hand reaching. Folks who never said the word conspiracy said it that day without knowing they'd said it. You could hear it in the way they softened their voices, like the walls might be listening. Unknown to most of us, inside that depository, they were counting shells, measuring angles, writing it down because someone had to. Outside, the plaza had changed costume, no longer parade route, now a taped-off grid, men with cameras tracing paths like detectives with lenses. Families at home tried to trace their own paths through the day. What were we doing when the shots were fired? Where did we stand? That's how you hold yourself steady. You mark your place in the story. I remember a moment that doesn't sound like much. My mother folded a dish towel and put it on top of another dish towel, perfectly aligned. She did it twice, then she sat. That's how stillness looked. Across town, a mechanic left a wrench on the hood of a car and walked to the radio on the wall, hands black with grease, not touching the dial, just standing close, like proximity would help him hear better. The TV kept feeding us images and withholding certainty, which felt honest. Anchors labeled everything, alleged, reported, confirmed. We learned to listen for those little words. We learned patience the hard way. When they wheeled Oswald past shouting reporters, we leaned forward on our couches as if we could get between the questions and the man. The camera caught his face for a half second, and my room, drew a breath we couldn't place. Some towns held impromptu services that night. A priest opened the church and people drifted in without planning to, not for answers, just not to be alone with the noise in their heads. Others stood in front yards under a sky that felt closer than usual. The air smelled like leaves and television tubes and something metallic you couldn't name. Dallas moved, we stayed. That was the rhythm. They processed and searched and walked suspects through corridors. We waited and watched and held our breath. And somewhere between the click of a typewriter in a Dallas office and the soft hum of my living room set, Sunday began to creep toward us with its own terrible plan. By Sunday, we were welded to the set. Church let out earlier than usual, or maybe it just felt that way, because everyone I knew was home before noon with coffee cups and quiet voices. We'd learn new habits in 2 days. Listen for confirmed. Wait for Cronkite. Don't trust the first sentence. Dallas promised a transfer in the police basement. Cameras were already there. Bright lights. Reporters stacked shoulder to shoulder like a hallway had been squeezed into a shoebox. You remember those basement walls, painted cinder block with that dull shine, the kind you see in old municipal buildings? Microphones with cords like snakes. The announcer walked us through it, steady as a metronome. They're bringing him down. They're moving him now. We leaned closer. Across the street, my neighbor did the same thing. I could see him through our window frame. 2 men in 2 houses bending toward the same glow. The police brought him out fast, Oswald in a sweater, cuffs on, flanked by officers trying to be taller than they were. Reporters surged, voices up in the same pitch you hear at train stations. Then the frame shifted just enough and you saw him, a man in a dark suit and a fedora stepping forward from the edge where civilians weren't supposed to be. It happened in the space between breaths. A flash of metal, a lunge, and the room we were in jumped as if the bullet traveled through the glass. Ruby's gun was small, but the sound wasn't. It cracked through that basement and through our living rooms, and suddenly every person on our block was frozen in the same shape, mouths open, hands midair, time split again. The camera jerked, the audio went ragged, and you heard bodies colliding off screen. A tangle of voices. He's been shot! Get a doctor! It was chaos, and it was live. Cronkite came back stammering, human in a way that made you trust him more. He repeated what he knew because there wasn't much to know. Shot on live television, the words sounded like ice landing in a glass. My neighbor dropped a plate, and it shattered like punctuation at the end of a sentence none of us had the courage to finish. Nobody moved to sweep it up. We were learning that some messes don't get cleaned while you're still inside them. In my house, the question hit hard. If TV could show that, what else could it bring into the room? We'd invited the world in with rabbit ears and a good signal. The world accepted. The screen wasn't a safe distance anymore. It was a front row seat, and the play wasn't stopping for intermission. Reporters tried to find footing. They asked the wrong questions because there were no right ones. Who is Jack Ruby? Why was he there? Was security? And then they'd stop themselves as if criticizing the guardrail while still hanging off the bridge was bad manners. The anchors started using new phrases to keep their balance, apparently reportedly believed to be. We clung to those small, careful words like they were ropes strung across a river. In kitchens and dens, the disbelief had a new flavor. It wasn't just grief now, it was doubt settling like dust on every surface. People who'd never read a file in their lives spoke like investigators. Did he act alone? How does a nightclub owner walk into a police basement with a loaded gun? You could feel trust in institutions tilt, not fall, but tilt like a bookshelf after a small quake. We straightened the family photos, but they never hung quite the same. And yet, even in the wildness, there were steadying sounds. A kettle started to whistle down the block, and someone took it off the burner. The phone rang and finally stopped. Small mercies, micro decisions. We still knew how to be decent to each other inside a storm. Back in Dallas, the camera found the ambulance doors swallowing Oswald. And the irony hit without anyone saying the word. The man accused of killing a president was racing to the same hospital, Parkland again. That loop tightened something in the chest. The anchors said it plainly, and for a second they were us, stunned at the repetition, at the way one place could hold so much of the country's weight. We sat there, citizens and witnesses, learning a new rule for the age of the lens. If it can happen in front of you. We weren't just seeing the news, we were absorbing it, pulse to pulse. The country pulled its chair closer to the set and didn't blink. And with that, shock began to harden into ritual. Mourning was already teaching us how to stand together without falling apart. Grief had been noise for 2 days, phones, sirens, anchors, but by Monday it arranged itself into order. You could hear it in the drums, slow, exact, like a heartbeat you could count with your fingers on the arm of a chair. That cadence carried the country from shock to something we could share without collapsing. If you ask me what it felt like, I'll tell you it felt like walking behind those drums, even if you were sitting at home. The procession filled the screen and somehow our rooms too. Boots met pavement in a choreography that said, "We will not stumble today." The riderless horse with the backward boot, it's hard to explain why that undid so many of us. Maybe because it suggested a life interrupted mid-stride. My father, not a sentimental man, cleared his throat twice when it passed. He'd say it was the smoke from his cigarette. We both knew better. Jackie became the country's backbone for a day. The black veil fell like a thin curtain over a furnace. That woman didn't sway. You could feel the room straighten because she did. She held her children's hands with a steadiness that told every mother watching how to breathe. We didn't know all the words to courage, but we knew what it looked like from a kitchen chair with a cracked linoleum floor and a TV humming warm in the corner. Church basements smelled like coffee and floor wax, and everyone talked in the same low register as if volume might fracture the day. Some towns asked the kids to write letters to the family. Crayons made clumsy hearts and blocky words. Sorry, pray, love, that said more than eloquence could. Flags went up on porches in hands that couldn't stop trembling. You want to know what resilience looks like? It's a man at his mailbox working a tiny halyard with fingers that don't obey him, and he keeps at it until the fabric reaches the top and breathes. Arlington's hills looked softer through black and white. The cameras gave us distance and closeness all at once. You saw the coffin move, the guard change, the faces set in disciplined grief, and then you glanced down at your own lap and realized your hands were clasped the same way as the honor guards. Parallel scenes everywhere. A table with too many casseroles, a living room carpet flattened by pacing, the smell of TV tubes, a little metallic, mixed with overcooked noodles. We all had the same country inside our houses that day. Then came the moment that knocked the breath out of us. John stepped forward. A small hand rose to his brow, the tiniest salute, stiff and earnest, the way a boy copies the men he's been told to trust. I'll be honest with you, I felt a heat behind my eyes that didn't ask permission. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My father stood, sat, stood again. That gesture took all the adult words, nation, sacrifice, duty, and translated them into a child's language we could feel. The room didn't just go quiet, it went hollow and full at the same time. The drums kept time through it as if they knew our hearts would lose track. Boots, hooves, wheels, breath. There was a weight to each sound that said, you're allowed to cry, but keep your feet under you. That's how a country cries together without falling apart. You give people something steady to walk to. Even those who stayed home rose when the casket passed the camera's eye. It wasn't protocol, it was instinct. In between the fixed ritual, there were tiny human breaks. A soldier's jaw clenched a second tighter than necessary. A widow's hand adjusted a cuff on a small coat. A priest's eyes dropped, then lifted, gathering the words he'd said 1,000 times and making them new. We watched for those because they gave us permission to be human inside the grandness. Back home, the mail didn't come, or if it did, nobody opened it. Stores stayed shuttered. The bar in the corner covered its neon sign with a dish towel and pushed the radio up toward the ceiling. Even dogs kept to their yards like they understood. The nation had chosen a single channel, and we all watched it together. If you think about it, that was its own kind of miracle. Millions of us, different towns, same room. When the lid closed at Arlington and the flag was folded with that impeccable geometry, you could feel the season shift. It wasn't winter yet by calendar, but the day carried winter in its bones. The air in our houses cooled a notch. The light through the window lost some of its warmth. People spoke about the eternal flame in the same voice you use to talk about a newborn. Soft, careful, a little amazed that it exists at all. I remember stepping outside after the coverage paused and realizing how loud quiet can be. No leaf blowers, no radios, just a thin wind and a neighbor's screen door complaining on its hinge. The world had the volume turned down and we didn't rush to turn it back up. The long quiet isn't about silence, it's about a shared agreement to move gently for a while. That week ended the way early winter days do, a little earlier than you're ready for. Supper felt like a formality. People scooped food because it was time to scoop food. We were tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. On the nightstand, next to the lamp, the newspaper headlines lay like heavy books. New vocabulary turned into household words we never asked for. Motorcade, depository, commission. We said them lightly because the alternative was a sob. But grief didn't end. It changed shape and found space for other things. By Tuesday, someone on our block checked on the widow 2 doors down. A boy shoveled the neighbor's walk without asking for a dime. Somebody wheeled our garbage cans back from the curb. Small acts started to stitch the fabric, not because anyone told us to, but because that's what you do when you've watched a family walk behind a flag and a drum. You carry a bit of the weight, one quiet errand at a time. And somewhere inside that long quiet, a question began that wouldn't leave us alone. After all this, what kind of country are we going to be? The answer didn't arrive with trumpets. It arrived in whispers and hands reaching, in that slow, steady drum that kept echoing even after the band's packed up and the cameras cooled. Now came the part nobody teaches you, what you do on Tuesday, on Wednesday, when the casserole's cool and the anchors switch to regular programming. The thing is, we woke up different and didn't have a word for it yet. End of innocence, maybe, but I think it was the beginning of responsibility, one small choice at a time. On the plane, Johnson raised his right hand with Jackie beside him, her suit still stained with the day we'd all like to wash clean. That oath inside a cramped cabin told us something plain. The line holds, continuity under pressure. It wasn't poetic, but it steadied the floorboards. We exhaled, not because the hurt went away, but because somebody had picked up the wheel and said, "I'm here." Then came the arguments, the kind that start around dinner and end at the sink. The Warren Commission was announced, answers promised, questions multiplied. In my house, folks who rarely raised their voices kept it civil and still found edges. Did they get it right? Could anyone? We read the headlines like fortune cookies and pretended we understood the fortunes. That's how families held on, talk it through, pass the peas, agree to sleep on it. Meanwhile, the culture started humming different. You could hear it in the music changing key, a seriousness under the backbeat. Young people took the grief we couldn't name and poured it into causes, civil rights, peace, voting, neighborhoods. Marches grew from candles in church basements. College kids who'd never mailed a letter to anyone but their parents wrote senators like they were old neighbors. It felt like the country's voice had dropped an octave. My friends split the way good people do when the road forks. Some enlisted because duty felt like a rope you could hold when the bridge shakes. Others organized because building something new seemed like the best memorial. I went to more meetings in gymnasiums than I care to admit. Folding chairs that pinched, coffee so strong it bit back, a microphone that squealed every time someone stood to speak. The message was simple: pick a corner of the world and help hold it up. Resilience didn't arrive with trumpets. It showed up as small, stubborn acts, voting lines that stretched around the block on rainy Tuesdays, volunteer sign-up sheets filled with shaky signatures, a neighbor climbing a ladder to fix a gutter he had no business being on, because the widow next door couldn't. We didn't wear capes. We borrowed casseroles and returned them clean. We learned to introduce ourselves at funerals and stay in touch afterward. And the kids, don't forget the kids. They grew up faster but kinder, if you ask me. They learned to listen to the news with the volume of their hearts turned up, not just their sets. They asked harder questions in civics class and expected more than slogans. When they cut their hair or grew it long, when they marched or saluted, it came from the same place, trying to keep faith with a future that suddenly felt like a promise we had to work for. All of us kept negotiating with trust, not blind, not broken, tested. We learned to hold two ideas at once: love your country and ask it to tell the truth. That balance is a muscle, and 1963 made us start lifting. Over time, we got stronger at it. Not perfect, stronger. We never got the world we thought we were promised, not exactly, but we learned to carry each other when the ground went soft. That's what the 60s found, a voice made less of slogans and more of hands. If you think about it, the decade wasn't one thing. It was a choir, and grief had given us our pitch. That weekend taught me how fragile normal is and how strong ordinary people get when normal breaks in their hands. If this stirred something in you, tell me where you were when you heard. Leave your memory in the comments so another soul can find theirs. Tap subscribe. Bring a friend who remembers or someone who wants to. Same porch, same time. We'll keep the light on.